So my name is Christina. I work on the listings team here at Nasdaq, and it's my great pleasure to welcome MPell and all of you to Nasdaq's market site. And actually, you're making history right now because this is the first event that we've had in Studio B. So I'm thrilled to introduce, absolutely, yeah. I'm thrilled to introduce someone who's a force in the world for tech and innovation, Pell. As many of you know, he's all about thinking big, innovating the tomorrow, breaking barriers, and pursuing all possibilities. But he doesn't do this for himself. He doesn't do this for his name. He truly does it for all of us and for innovation and for truly driving the future. I'm going to tell you a little story. So I met Mike a few months ago at a networking event. And when we were talking, we were saying, what do you do for work? And I was learning about him and his work. And he said, I work at Microsoft Garage. I thought that was pretty cool, but he didn't actually tell me who he is, what he pioneered, what his mark in this world. And he's so humble. And that speaks monuments for the kind of person that Mike is. So as we're talking, he tells me that he actually invented the Microsoft Garage. And then yesterday, I learned that he invented the PDF and Adobe Acrobat. And he's truly changed and touched everyone's life in this room and around the world. I mean, who here has ever exported a Word document into a PDF to send across different channels? Who here has ever wanted to edit a PDF? I think all of us. That's all thanks to Mike. Mike is recognized as a world-class designer and industry thought leader in the fields of next-gen visualization and smart information. He started his journey as an entrepreneur and has become the go-to guy for Adobe and Microsoft. He's the brain behind the game-changing PDF and Acrobat at Adobe, and he has over 20 patents, US patents under his name. Right now, Mike leads Microsoft's global innovation program in the heart of New York City and has inspired top customers like JP Morgan, the United Nations, ESPN, and right here at Nasdaq. Part of where we're standing today is because of Mike's innovation. But here's the thing that really sets him apart. Mike is not just a tech wizard, he's a pro at making tech work for everyone and truly making it understandable for people who may not be very tech savvy. He's written 3 books on the future of technology, and today we're here celebrating the launch of Visualizing Business, all about understanding what he calls a 4D model to help us understand the invisible elements within our businesses. Please join me in welcoming Pell.
Thank you all for coming. That was great, Christina. Almost as if I wrote it myself. No, that was much better than me. Thank you.
Thank you. So talk to me about the book. This is your 3rd book that you launched. Why is it so timely to launch this book now?
Because everything is about AI right now, but it's really more than that. It's data visualization and spatial computing and AI combined to help people really see and understand how businesses work. We've been using static representations of data, whether it's spreadsheets or charts or graphs, forever. And we all have to figure it out every single time. That's ridiculous. It's crazy. Like, we know that business is always moving. It's chaotic. It's constantly in motion, super dynamic. So it's just always bugged me that we never got to see how things actually work. There's flows and motion. That's what 4D, or sort of adding time, the element of time to 3D, brings to this new approach. And so I'm very excited to sort of roll it out today and to talk to you about it.
And you say AI is a time machine for business. You can rewind and fast forward. And you actually visually describe it through your models in your book. Can you talk to me through that?
Yeah, of course. So again, we're at a moment where you can do so many things with AI. And one of the things it's great at is not only pulling historic data to be able to chart it, so existing data can be shown in very interesting new ways. But now, because of these new generative models and foundational models, we can actually forecast and simulate what can happen next. And that's sort of the idea of moving a slider back and forth, like as if you were watching a Netflix movie, right? You can rewind into the past, fast forward into the future. It's the same thing with information and data now, thanks to what we have.
Why is that so important? Like, how is this going to propel business moving forward?
Because all of us have to figure out how things work every single time, instead of the data telling us how it really works and making a better connection. It's just so game-changing to be able to see inside a process or a company or an organization or things that have always been completely opaque to us. Through the help of visualization, you see behind me some examples of that. It's all completely possible, and it's going to change global business forever.
And you are too, with the launch of your book. You worked with Rafiq, especially on the forward for this book. Talk to me about that.
So most people know Rafiq Anadol for his amazing data art creations. He's exhibited in MoMA. All of you have seen the MSG Sphere in Las Vegas. His work is shown on the outside of that. He has a real knack for taking huge data sets, gigantic information troves, and turning them into something that feels living, almost fluid in the way that they change. And so Rafiq and I met years ago, and he sort of noticed that what he does for art is very much what I do for business. Being able to take this data and AI and sort of run it through some processes to show it in a way that has never been shown before. And so we hit it off, and we really enjoyed working on this together. And one of his insights was that it's not so different. Art and business are really not so different. What he's doing, what I'm doing, very related, and I think that all of you will be able to see that. So I'm really thrilled that he's having so much success around the entire world, and too bad he can't be here today, but we'll catch up with him.
You really get to bring your insights to life, and this book lets you recognize that you can simulate your future. How did you come about to actually creating those simulations, and when was that aha moment for you that we need this for business?
It was a very long time ago. So in the book, there's some sketches at the very end that I did 20 years ago. Literally, showing this whole time machine idea, being able to rewind through history and fast forward into the future through simulation and forecasting. It just always seemed crazy to me that we weren't able to do that, because we have the technology, we have an approach, we have the data, we're all smart. There's no reason to not do it. It took a little while for everything to mature. We have 5G, like broadband now, we have amazing graphics, hardware is cheap, so everything is perfect right at the moment. And so for me, it was easy to prototype this because everything is now at our fingertips and very affordable, which is why it's the perfect time for people to understand what's happening with this movement, because we can really put it to use.
And that movement, it's really that shift from 2D to 4D, shifting data from 2D to a 4D model.
Yeah, you're right, we're jumping right over 3D, forget that.
Yeah, no, irrelevant. What is 4D?
4D, simply put, is taking everything that's good about 3D, three-dimensional graphics, three-dimensional visualization, adding the element of time, right, what we've been talking about, fast forwarding and rewinding, and also, of course, data and AI. So 4D is really just shorthand for being able to manipulate time, either by fast forwarding or rewinding.
This is all used to simplify business and simplify business processes to in turn drive better business decisions. But you have a quote in your book that said, "We need to clarify, not just simplify. In spite of our efforts to be more organized, we have created a mess." How have we created a mess, and how is AI going to be used to fix that mess?
The mess is that we've tried to show everything in an effort to be correct and to be precise. We end up showing everything instead of looking at the things that are most relevant. And so whether it's AI or just a better approach to design, we should help people to see what's important, see the insights, sort of surface all the invisible elements that would be impossible to pick out of the mess. So when you look at some of our charting and some of the ways that people represent networks or systems or flows, I say in the book, it's like a spilled box of spaghetti on the floor, right? It's impossible to make sense of. AI is actually quite good at summarizing and helping people get to something that's concise to be able to understand what's in that big mess.
Can you give an example with especially some of the visuals behind me? That's some of the 4D visuals that you're describing in your book. How can you just give an example or a case study of how we can use some of these graphics?
So the one that's showing behind it is actually the idea of using spatial computing, right? Being able to see things in 3 dimensions. So in that particular image, people were standing around a set of data and talking about it. They can play what if as much as they want with the data set. They can talk to it in a very conversational way. So this immersive approach to data is game changing. When you've ever been around your data that you recognize and it's immersive, meaning you either have a headset or it's projected, it's in some form that you sort of feel that you're part of it, you can't ever want to go back because it just clicks. It makes sense. We're all used to the real world, right? We've grown up with real tangible objects. That's what this approach, 4D and 3D, helps people with, to sort of make sense out of the abstract. And that's what, you're not seeing a lot of animation. By the way, if you go to the website associated with the book, visualizingbusiness.com, there will be releases that I'll be doing of all the animated pieces that illustrate these points.
Can you also talk about using responsible design techniques?
Oh, we all have to do that, right? It's a very hot topic these days. So anyone using artificial intelligence knows that if we don't pay attention, some bad things can happen. So responsible design is never, so I work at Microsoft. Microsoft has spent a lot of years compiling a set of principles that we abide by when we create systems for other people to use, but it's really just the notion that you have to pay attention to some fundamental things about privacy and security, making sure people are always in the loop. And that's why, oftentimes when we talk about responsible AI use, it's really making sure that it's not just letting it go off and do something without people paying attention, which is the key.
So your cinematic storytelling techniques that we're talking about, how do you necessarily see sound? How do you bring that to life?
Wow, thank you for asking, Christina. That is the most important part. It's funny, right? You would think that visuals, because this is such a visual book, sound is always the most important part. And we know that from going to the movies, right? It adds drama, it adds suspense, it adds clarity in some cases. Sound is also one of the most impressive design elements that there is. You immediately recognize sound for what it is. If you don't get it right, it's incredibly disturbing. But as a storytelling element, it clarifies. And I would say that it sort of punches things up when you need it to, just like in a movie.
Why is storytelling so important in the business world? Because sometimes they don't really seem like they would go together, but realistically, they're very important to each other.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that they are storytellers. You're presenting some information to another coworker, to a group of people, to a gigantic audience. That's all storytelling. Whether it's you're coming from the business side or marketing or design, doesn't matter. Storytelling can be encoded. It can be captured and codified and made to be simpler for a lot of people. And that's what I talk about in the book, is the exact approach to how 4D design helps you to tell better stories with data through AI.
I think another quote that's really interesting that goes off that point, you say, we'll eventually read these light sculptures just like you're reading your flight status signage in airports today, particularly through the use of intuitive design. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So you may have seen behind us, there are light sculptures, these vertical, beautiful rainbow-looking pieces of glass that encode information. And so just like you're walking through an airport today and you see some signage, you understand immediately what it's trying to tell you. This will become so prevalent, we will actually use sculpture, data sculpture, to help us understand what's happening currently.
Wow, that's amazing. And so business is always in motion, and we look at business as a static representation. So how do you hope that this book changes that?
Oh, well, because that's the whole point. That drives me crazy. Yes, it's incredibly useful. We've run businesses for centuries with static information, but we don't have to do that anymore. We can actually see how our businesses work, see how the processes flow, see what we talk about in the book as being the invisible part, which is most important, how people interrelate. What are the invisible parts that we know are important to the business, but we never see show up in our dashboards? We never see show up in our spreadsheets or graphs. That's the part that we want to get to, but put them in motion like they already are. In a lot of ways, we're not representing business as it truly is until now, because now we can see it move.
You're building creativity into business processes.
Well, I would like to think that we're surfacing the creativity that's already inherent in business, but we just don't see it that way.
How did you see it?
I'm a super visual person. So whenever someone talks to me about a business model or a process or the market, by the way, I love being at Nasdaq because 20 years ago, this was my inspiration to start these experiments with the time machine and seeing the dynamics of live markets. I've never seen anybody do it well. We're going to do it really well now. And so for me, I'm so visual. I just see when people talk about things as a model, I just see it in motion always. Almost like you would see an animation of an engine running, like a combustion engine with the pistons moving and the spark plugs firing. That's how I see business. And so now a lot of other people will see it that way too.
What do you hope the main takeaway is for anyone reading the book?
Wow, that we have relied far too long on static information, and there's no reason for that to continue. It's time for all of us to sort of pitch in and get us to the next level, which is visualizing business in a completely different way.
That's amazing. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions?
Yeah.
No, they just want to get to the good part.
How do you think Power BI is going to change some of the processes?
Oh, good question. So how will, I'll say, visualization tools change? They're going to adopt these practices. They'll start being great at data storytelling. They'll start being great at using animation to highlight what's very static right now. And so I think that this will be a movement across the entire industry. Question?
Which function or industry is most ripe for aha moments with 4D potential?
Wow, we're sitting in it, right? Financial markets, right? I mean, Nasdaq literally could not be a better place to talk about the launch of this book. It is by far the most complex thing that most people deal with. And it's a bit confusing and a bit opaque and a bit, I would say, overwhelming, right, when you're trying to make sense of it. This is going to help quite a bit.
What resistance do you envisage people having against the adoption of 4D?
As always, nobody likes to change, right? It's human nature. We won't change, as a matter of fact, unless it's so much better than what we've already been doing. This is actually that so much better. And people won't believe it until they see it and try it, and they can actually play out what if as much as they want and see where things are going to end up without spending any money, without investing any effort, other than just interacting with these new systems. And so I think a lot of the pushback will be natural. This is new, I'm busy, don't have time to do that. But when people see what it's really for, I think they'll come around. Yes?
What do you think the margin of error for the 4D time machine, like in the future with AI in the next, I don't know, couple of years? Like what is the margin of error?
That's a great question. I don't think anybody can predict, how accurate it can be. But we know we're getting better and better every day at being able to use predictive models. Things almost change daily, like you know very well. And so where we are today is not an indicator of where we're going to be in 6 months or a year as far as accuracy. So I have a lot of hope that it's going to be eventually quite accurate. But for now, just knowing anything, being able to see into the future at all is going to help quite a bit. Yes?
Mike, you work in a very cool innovation space. For the average business user, where do you think this is going to start to show up if they're either working from home or in a traditional office?
It's how we all communicate, right? I mean, everybody has to show up in meetings to report their status or find out what's happening. This approach will start to creep into those meetings, especially for reporting financials and reporting, what's happening with, let's say, different engineering projects or different marketing campaigns. Being able to see something in motion is going to be game-changing, and people will want to show up with that new approach.
So we have data up on that wall behind us or in front of us. How would you visually display that data? Right now it's 2D. How would you make it 4D?
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit before, right? And I was saying, yeah, like those big green numbers are beautiful. It's a really nice font, super clear. I can tell what it is, but it's not being compared. And so humans, like people, cannot make sense out of a number unless you compare it to something. And so the very first thing I would do is want to compare it to something, but then use size and volume and shape to be able to tell me more quickly, what is that about? How does that pertain to me? Does that affect me, or is it something that I need to know? So I think that going from a flat 2D display dashboard that we have now to being a little bit more spatial so I can make sense out of that information is the very next step for us, and hopefully for Nasdaq.
Do you think this 4D model is going to be the next generation of generative AI? Because right now, ChatGPT, like you said in your book, it's very surface level.
Yeah. So one of the foundational technologies required for 4D is simulation. And simulation is now coming into its own. So companies like NVIDIA are sort of head and shoulders above anyone else in doing large-scale simulation. This is exactly what we needed to sort of power this revolution, because they have, they're making the chips and some of the software to help with the visualization part. They also have the AI and the underlying systems to do the simulation. So it's sort of a one-stop shop.
A lot of good things coming.
Mm-hmm. We're good? Yeah? Okay. Well, now it's time
I have
to go
one
have
last
some fun.
question.
Okay.
What legacy do you want to leave with this book?
Wow. I had a very rare opportunity to change global business when we invented Acrobat and PDF back in the 90s. I truly feel like this will change global business again, because we're finally going to be able to see how businesses really work. Anybody can tell, even the most complicated business model, the supply chain, everything that goes into marketing campaigns, it's going to become super clear. I think that that's going to be a huge legacy.
Let's give it up for Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we're out.